Good morning, everybody. This is Christine Jacobs. For those of you who have not been on one of our calls before, I'm the Executive Director of Represent PA. We are the PAC in Pennsylvania that's totally dedicated to flipping both the House and the Senate with strong progressive women. We give women a leg up in their primaries. We give them support all through their races. We connect them with other resources. But we've helped to elect some just absolutely fabulous women in the 8 years or so that we've been doing this. This cycle, we expect to invest over $500,000 in these kind of races. We're already at 400,000. We have the next 100,000 in the bank. So, but we've got a long way to go, and these are races that need money. So thank you for joining us. One of the things we try and do on these calls is help people, help voters, help possible investors to really understand what the lay of the land is in Pennsylvania. So we've introduced you over the years to a number of our candidates, to a number of our existing legislators. We've talked about how hard races is, how important money is. But the other thing that we really like to talk about is, what are the big issues in Pennsylvania? What do you need to look at? What do you need to know about? You know, you could be any kind of voter. You know, I've used this slide before. You can be an abortion voter. God knows we need them this year. You can be a voting rights and democracy voter. God knows the state legislature wants to change that. Any of these issues, fair funding of elections, fair districts, education, the environment, climate change, clean air and clean water. Do you know this House Committee on the Environment and Energy only talks about energy? They've had one meeting ever on that discussed climate change, and the only guest was a climate change denier. So these are the kind of things that go on with the minority in Harrisburg. And nothing is going to change about these issues without a Democratic governor and a Democratic majority in at least one chamber. Yes, you hear a lot about, well, you know, Governor Wolf has vetoed a lot of bad, in our opinion, legislation, and we hope Josh Shapiro will do the same. But this legislature has gotten smart about trying to put things, it's smart, devious, about putting things into constitutional amendments, and which do not require the governor's signature. So this year, more than ever, it is critical that we flip at least one chamber. And we'll get to that and what our role is. But today we're going to talk about gun safety. Approximately 1,600 Pennsylvanians die from gun violence every year, and over 3,000 or more are injured. Pennsylvania averages a mass shooting every 10 days. In the last 5 years, we've had more than 100. Since the Parkland shooting, 26 states, including 15 that have Republican governors, have signed 55 laws addressing gun violence crisis, including 15 with Republican governors, but not Pennsylvania. This is a state that we have not had. I was asked, we have a couple questions that came in early, and somebody said, why isn't this being addressed? And I'm sure you're going to hear about why this isn't being addressed in Pennsylvania. We had a question about, what about bipartisan gun legislation? And I'm sure Representative Hanbidge will be able to address the bipartisan nature of our current legislature. So today, to give you the lay of the land and to talk about what's going on, we're really excited to have Adam Garber, who's the Executive Director of CeaseFire PA. He's been working to end the epidemic of gun violence across Pennsylvania, and he advocates for better gun safety in Harrisburg. He's also, in his past, he's advocated for clean air and clean water at various levels. So he understands the things that I mentioned and the importance of having a legislature that you could work with. We also, speaking of people we're proud to have helped, endorsed early and proud to have her in the legislature, and that's Representative Liz Hanbidge from Montgomery County. And she's an attorney, she's a child advocate. That's what the work that she did before joining the legislature. And she's a strong advocate for youth safety and well-being. And the use of guns and the number of children who are killed by guns or injured by guns is extraordinary. And these are all issues she's worked on. You know, we talk a lot at Represent about some people who get elected to office to be somebody. Hey, I'm important. I'm an elected official. I get a pension. I get money to spend around. I get to hire my relatives. Aren't I important? And then we have elected officials who want to do something, who really run for office because they see a need, they see change that's necessary. And we're really proud of the work that Representative Liz Hanbidge is doing, because that's exactly her focus on what she's been doing in Harrisburg. So with that, Adam Garber, how bad is it in Pennsylvania?
Well, thanks, Christine, and thanks for having me and all of y'all for your excellent work. It's, as you said, pretty bad in Pennsylvania. I want to talk a little bit about how bad it is and also how it impacts all corners of the state, because I think we often think of gun violence as a city problem. We think of it as a problem in places like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, even places like York and Reading. But every corner of the Commonwealth is being devastated by the gun violence crisis and is losing people to it on a daily basis. And I think fundamentally, when we talk about what government is intended to do, it starts with keeping people safe. Because if we can't keep people alive and if we can't keep people safe, everything else kind of falls apart. You can't learn, you can't work, you can't enjoy parks and outdoor recreation or your family and your friends. And when we're losing 1,752 people last year to gun violence and 3,000 more people are being shot, it means we failed at that. And not because we don't know how to solve this problem. I like to think that there are problems that are actually really tricky to solve, that are difficult, and maybe there is no easy solution. This isn't one of those problems. We know fundamentally when there are more guns in our society, when there are easier access to them, whether it's at the local, community, or state level, that we see more violence, we see more lost life. And in Pennsylvania specifically, I think what we've seen is that, let me break it down. So as Christine said, there's 1,600 people who are killed by firearms every year. What a lot of people don't know is about almost 2/3 of those, over 900, are firearm suicides. So actually the vast majority of gun deaths are firearm suicides. And that's often not because of in fact, almost ever a mental health issue. So it's not a clinically diagnosed issue. It's any of us in a moment of crisis who can't find a way out, who decides because they just don't see an option and they complete suicide. And ultimately, what that is that when they have access to a firearm, they're more likely to die. So firearms are fatal 90% of the time. I mean, they're intended to do damage, right? Other methods of suicide are, end in death 20 to 40% of the time. So like simply put, even if we can do nothing to intervene in that moment of crisis, but we remove the firearm from it, we'll save 40 to 50% of those lives. And most people don't try again. It's why some of the legislators have really taken on this issue. And we've seen, as you know, and Liz is one of them, but women really lead the charge. I mean, Jen O'Mara, who I believe y'all supported, she's leading the charge for extreme risk protection orders because she lost her father to suicide. And she understands the toll that takes on her and her family, and the fact that she can't introduce her new child to her grandfather. And so one piece of this that's really important is when you look at that, it's not the cities. So the 3 counties, I'm not going to do geography quiz this morning, but I usually like to give it. The 3 counties with the highest rate of gun suicide, it's Philadelphia, gun death, Philadelphia, Wayne County along the Delaware Water Gap, and Fayette County along the southwest border, 2 very rural counties. The second piece of this problem is the homicide problem. And we hear about it a lot in Philadelphia. I live in Point Breeze in South Philadelphia, and one of the zip codes hardest hit by the crisis. It is not the most uncommon for gunshots to ring out in my neighborhood. I've had my 4-year-old ask me a few times what they are. And what I've seen happen in Philadelphia, and we've also seen happen in other cities, is that death and that cause of violence is not only ending lives and causing damage, but it's really changing the nature of Philadelphia. When you can't talk to someone else, when you can't say something on a subway platform, as we saw someone get shot, or outside a cheesesteak shop, it means we're breaking down the very nature of our society. So in Philadelphia, we lose, in the cities around the state primarily, we lose about 600 people a year. A little bit more last year. We've obviously seen a spike. And it's not just Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Homicide rates reached their highest ever in places like Harrisburg. I was with Mayor Williams a few months ago, and she mentioned someone was shot right on the steps of the Capitol, basically. Like, it's literally falling on the doorstep of the General Assembly, and not for Liz's fault, but as you'll hear, nothing's happening. And then I think the third piece is the mass shootings piece, and you heard a little bit about it. Mass shootings dominate the news coverage, right? We see and hear the most about them after Uvalde and Buffalo. And I think what's terrifying about, I don't think it's shocking, but what's terrifying about mass shootings is I had to stop at a grocery store last night because we forgot to buy an extra set of beans for dinner. And like the very act of that could be endangering just because, as we know in Buffalo's case, it could be a gun become a shooting range. And so I think what we're fundamentally fearful of mass shootings is they're 1% of the shootings, but again, they're terrifying because we're sending our kids to school. There's a security locked guard at my synagogue every morning when I go in at 7:30 in the morning to pray. This is just really changing how we live. And in terms of solutions, like this is a problem. We have more solutions than we know what to do with. I think there's I can't even keep track of all the bills. I feel like, Liz, it's like there's 100 bills waiting action just sitting in Judiciary Committee and so many solutions. And we rank, so I will tell you this. So we rank in about the middle of the pack nationally. We're 33rd, 34th for gun deaths in the nation per capita. But I don't think it's a very good measurement. I mean, even the best places, the Massachusetts and the Californians of the world, I would argue are losing way too many people to this crisis because it's still way above what you see in other countries. And what we think needs to happen is really a regiment where, you can live a life free from gun violence. I was saying beforehand, I know I'm supposed to fear you and make you worried about this problem. I do want to give a little bit of hope if I can before we talk about all bad in Harrisburg. I'm actually more hopeful because of the leadership of progressive champions charging ahead than I've been in a long time. So just to take a sense of this for a second, we've had more victories in the last 2 months on gun violence than we've had in 20 years. So everyone knows the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act passed. And I was with Senator Murphy last week hearing the blow by blow of how that happened. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for his leadership in Connecticut, working with folks like Senator Casey and women leaders here in Pennsylvania, like Congresswoman Dean and Congresswoman Wild, who really helped push the initiative and understand what was going to happen there. The state legislator's done something similar, and I don't want to take Liz's thunder here, but I just have to thank her for helping invest $105 million in violence prevention programs in the state budget. And that was really done through the leadership of a whole suite of people. And we have a new ATF director. And so we've got a big problem on our hands. What we're really focused on is the fact that, we're facing this crisis on a daily basis. And we're just not seeing the policy pieces move ahead to address it. So that's kind of the quick story on what's going on gun violence in PA. But Christine, I don't know if I missed pieces you want me to cover.
The other things that I'm curious about, maybe this is you and maybe this is Representative Hanbidge, and that's that, is the problem too many guns? Is the problem to access? A lot of the discussion on the national level has been about, let's make sure that everybody knows you got to lock up your guns. Is it 18-year-olds buying guns? Is it,
yeah.
How do we solve this problem? And I'm sure we'll go into that with the bills that you're talking about, but is it just too many guns and the accessibility of guns?
I mean, I think in some ways it is. I mean, I think, look, we have 400 million guns in this country. We have more guns than we have people. There were over 1 million sold last year in Pennsylvania alone. And in places I'll just give the Philly stats. 1 in 6 people in Philadelphia have a concealed carry permit. 1 in 6 people. We've just reached the point where there are, I think, fundamentally too many guns. But I have to say, I don't think that's going to change soon. It's really hard to claw back the cats out of the bag, whatever analogy we want to go down. I think a lot of the policies we look towards is ways to create intervention and space or keep firearms out of the hands of people who we know might want to hurt others. And so what we've crafted, you're right, there's a zillion bills. And we'd be happy if we could get 1 or 2 right now across the finish line in Harrisburg. And so we've got to pick and choose a little bit. And it always gets me in a little bit of trouble because everyone has their favorite and most important policy and they're all really critical. But what we've done is we've tried to put together a common agenda with partners across the state. So if you think about gun violence as a statewide problem, you need different pieces to solve different parts of the problem, right? There's not going to be for the most part, outside of a few policies, a one size fits all. And so extreme risk protection orders, which allow you to temporarily intervene in the case of a loved one who's at risk of hurting themselves or hurting others in a mass shooting. That's Representative O'Mara's legislation in the House side. And it's been proven in Indiana, like not a purple even state, right? Indiana, they have extreme risk protection orders. Florida has extreme risk protection orders signed by Senator Scott, who was when he was governor. And they have, in every 10 removals of a firearm, one life has been saved, whether it's suicide or mass shootings. In California, it's been used to intervene in mass shootings. And so that's a really critical policy. In the community level violence, so the rising violence in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Harrisburg and every other, kind of Rust Belt city, what we know is a lot of the guns used in shooting are claimed to be lost or stolen. So it's like a massive loophole. So I can't buy a gun for someone else. I have to buy a gun for myself, right? And if I buy a gun for someone else, it's called a straw purchase. If the police come knocking and ask, hey, we found your gun at a crime scene, how did it get there? And I say, oh, I lost it. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I lost it. Well, it makes it harder to prosecute that effort, right? And it makes it harder to track. So there's two pieces. One, we're seeing guns stolen out of cars all the time. People just leave them in their glove compartment and they don't report them until after the fact. And two is it's a method around our illegal trafficking. So New Jersey, our neighbor, has this law and they've seen a 46% decrease in illegal firearm trafficking. Like, this is a place where I think we really should be able to get to. I know this is like Democrat, progressive, but it's a place we should all be able to agree for once. Like, illegal firearm trafficking, we should do it, and yet we can't. Like, I go into conversations with Republicans, and they obfuscate. They go, oh, well, you don't want to put the onus on the lawmaker. And then the last big one right now for us is universal background checks. I can go to the store, fail my background check. I guess I won't, but anyway, I could. Let's say I failed my background check. And I couldn't buy an AR-15, right? Let's say I couldn't buy it. I could turn around and, I don't know, this is a bad example, but if Liz owned an AR-15, I could privately buy it from her with no background check. That's like a gap in the system that's fairly obvious that should be closed. And so those are the three things that we think kind of address a huge scope of the violence. It's not going to solve all the forms of violence, but it's a start. And there are places where Republican states, progressive states, everyone has sort of agreed, law enforcement agrees. And so those are three of the policies we're focused on, but safe storage, waiting periods. I mean, it would take me an hour just to go through the list of all the bills waiting in Representative Kaufman's committee, which is a good segue to Liz, probably.
Well, and that is where I'm heading next. So Representative Hanbidge, you are, this is something you've talked a lot about, but you're not getting anything done.
No, we're not.
And I'm not saying you personally, I'm saying the state legislature is not getting anything done. And so what do we do?
So let me back up, because I want to start with, that is very intentional. This isn't a partisan deadlock. This isn't some sort of like, oh, we're still negotiating. In September of 29, Chairman Kaufman, who's the Republican chair of Judiciary, who makes basically all the decisions about judiciary, declared that no ERPO bill, so the extreme risk protection orders that common sense says will save lives, and the data is there to back it up, said no ERPO will provide as long as he is committee chair. And he has stood by that. In May of this year, May 25th of this year, I was the prime sponsor on what's called a discharge resolution on that bill, which forces the bill out of committee by discharging the committee from further consideration of it. So ideally, what happens when you submit a discharge resolution is a few days later, a few session days later, you're able to bring the bill to a vote without it having to go through committee. Sorry, I just see a question. It's Robert Kaufman, Kauffman. And what happened with the discharge resolution was Kaufman decided that he wanted to bring it up, and he threw it back to another committee, threw it back to the local government committee. All bills under Title 18 and all firearm related bills have previous to this always gone to Judiciary Committee. So he basically said, no, we're not going to handle that. We're just going to throw it away. So that then starts the clock on, again, having to go through a certain period of session days before we can force it out of committee again. That's essentially killed the bill. So as though that wasn't enough, and just to give some context as to just how deadly this is with what he's doing. So between the day that he said that he's never going to allow an ARPA bill to go through, and the day that I signed the discharge resolution, there were 974 days. I have notes. And on average, based on the data that we have available, it's not through 2021 or 2022 yet. About 2.5 people die every day in Pennsylvania by gun suicide. So since he made his declaration, we've had about 2,500 suicides in Pennsylvania. And ERPOs reduce suicide between 7.5% and 13.5%. So as Adam said, about 10%. Even under the most conservative estimation, 7.5%, we could have saved 188 lives between the day that he made that declaration and the day we signed the discharge resolution. And he has no shame. There's absolutely no concept that the people that we're putting at risk, and in particular are veterans. And I've actually gotten a lot of flack from weird online sources, because one of the things that's happening in Pennsylvania is that we're not having enough conversations. We progressives, we liberals, we people who want to reform and prevent gun violence aren't having loud enough conversations, because a lot of the air in the room is taken up by the people that are absolutely 2A. We're never going to have these conversations. I got 990 emails from people outside of my district, and 3 from inside of my district asking me to support expansion of gun rights. And it's very, very deliberate what we're seeing in these committees about expanding gun rights. And Kaufman actually, so there were other discharge resolutions offered, one of which was to raise the age to buy AR-15 type weapons to 21. So we don't let people buy cigarettes before 21. We don't let people buy alcohol before 21. And this was sort of a common sense with carve-outs. Peace officers could utilize weapons as needed. But it just basically raised the age of purchase. And I want to read to you what the Republicans in the Judiciary Committee did. So they gutted the bill. They said, you know what, we're going to let it go forward, but we're going to make a few changes. And the changes they made included saying that, this is a direct quote, the laws in existence regulating firearms licensing are ineffectual in preventing crime and only interfere with the natural right of law-abiding citizens. It is necessary to codify the inherent right to the carrying of firearms, whether openly or concealed, and that the right to self-defense is an inherent natural right that shall not be questioned. So not only are they not bringing up these bills, but when they're forced to, when we say, you have to do something, we have to do every action possible to try to protect people from gun violence, they ruin good bills. And honestly, until Kaufman is no longer chair, and he's not going anywhere, I don't even know if he has an opponent. So until we flip the House, essentially.
He does not, I just looked, he does not have an opponent.
And he's beloved for this kind of stuff. And until he is made minority chair, which I can't wait till he's the minority chair. Truly can't wait till he's the minority chair, because it's actually really interesting. He's very, even on any sort of crime-related bill or basically any law-related bill, he's not an attorney. And he'll debate with members who have practical experience in various types of law, the merits of the law, and you're going, I practice this. I can tell you from my own experience. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. And you're like, you've never practiced this. So from just a procedural standpoint, I'd like somebody with some practical experience leading that committee, but we have to make him minority chair. So we need every voice raised and everybody fighting. And a surprising number of people, if you go to the doors, I've been knocking doors for a few months now. You go to the doors, Republicans and Democrats alike want to feel safe in their communities. And when you're saying sort of liberty and freedom, which is the sort of tagline we hear from the Republican Party, they're not saying the liberty and freedom to go outside in the world around you and be safe. They're saying liberty and freedom for gun rights. And the concept of sort of putting the rights of guns above the rights of your personal safety and that of your children is just obscene. So as you're knocking doors, as you're talking to people, as you're talking to your friends, please make sure to lift up this issue and really put a face on it and put the fact that how bad it is in Pennsylvania, because a lot of these are common sense bills. Very easy, very, very things that just most people agree on, and they're agreeing on it in all sorts of parts of the country, but people like Kaufman are absolutely hamstringing this process. So I'm happy to take questions. I don't know.
So one of the questions I got in advance has to do with why aren't you working across the aisle? And I think you've answered that, but could you be more pointed about, you know, are there Republicans on this committee who would agree they just disagree with Kaufman's approach, or is it that they don't want to speak up against leadership?
Anyone who has disagreed with Kaufman on this committee is no longer on this committee that I've seen, with the exception of Todd Stevens. But he, I mean, like, and he's interesting because here he says he's pushing ERPO and he's doing things like that, but he never filed a discharge resolution. He's never worked to get it out of committee. So his name might be on the bill with O'Mara's, but he's not doing anything.
Yeah,
And,
I think
just so you know, Todd Stevens is the current representative. He's being challenged this year by Missy Serrato, who's been endorsed by us. So sorry, Adam. I have to get the commercials in there.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I think Todd's the only person on the committee, and he's fairly ostracized from the party outside of the rest of the ping. Like, the thing I keep in mind here is two pieces. Like, I mean, we've tried, like, I've met with conservative Republicans, I've met with Speaker Cutler's office, and some of them, I will tell you privately, will tell me they support things like lost or stolen or even ERPOs, right? I've had some, but when I try to say, well, you got to put your name on the bill, it's when we're going to move the policy, you got to have some courage here. That's where we get stuck, right? And ultimately, what are you going to Harrisburg for, right? Like, at the end of the day, if you're not going to save people's lives, like, what are you doing there? And there, I think that until we fundamentally change this dynamic of who's in charge, or make it so they're less afraid, like, they're just so afraid of losing in the primaries, and they have to be more afraid of losing on the substance of the issues, because in recognizing that most Pennsylvanians agree with us on this, like 80%, right? Every poll, that's not going to change, right? Because they know they can do whatever they want and vote the way they are. And in fact, it's in their political interest often. So I think that's the functional challenge. It's not a substantive disagreement.
I also think that they're listening to the loudest voices in the room. Maybe they're not looking at the fact that 900 or what is it 0.05% of the emails that they get related to gun violence are actually from their district. And sort of they've been washed out, or some of them brainwashed about sort of where the common sense reforms are. And nobody sent us to Harrisburg to do like the politically cool thing. There's a lot of questions, but not a lot of people have the political courage to say, I'm going to protect people, or I'm going to do this and sort of for the right reasons and motivations.
One of the questions we just got in the chat is, has the Supreme Court ruling on New York's restrictive gun law had any effect on gun policies in Pennsylvania?
Not as yet, but I think it will.
Yeah, the New York case is fairly narrow and doesn't apply to our statute. I think the larger concern is going to be the further interpretation of what the Second Amendment supposedly protects. So the quick version is, in New York's case, their permit law basically requires judgment by local officers that you have a reason that you uniquely need to carry a firearm. And Kavanaugh, in his concurring opinion, said, look, it's got to be objective. So in fact, you could enhance training. You could require 3 weeks of training under the ruling, at least as of now, to get a permit, but you can't have it based on what's seen as subjective reasons. I think the bigger question is, well, one, they're just clearly writing up I don't know. They're making up the laws. Like, there's just no way around it. Like, just fundamentally, I hate to say that about judges, but like, they were like, oh, we're going to talk about history, ignoring the fact that in 1782, there was a law in Philadelphia banning the carrying and ownership of any firearm without express permission of the mayor. Like 1782 in Philadelphia. So, I think the long-term impacts could be significant.
That was before gunpowder, before a lot of the regulations. Guns were a little different in 1782 also.
And that's the thing that always gets me is, in 200 years, what are they going to look like? Can my iPhone do it?
Right. Well, and also we've been, you know, when are hand grenades and things like that going to be allowed? Because, hey, you know, it's a weapon, you know, why? So, Liz, if you could answer this one once again, very clearly. Jill Altshuler says, I'm not sure I understand correctly. There's basically no chance of getting any gun safety, common sense gun legislation passed with Kaufman in charge, and he's running unimposed and he'll stay in charge. Please answer that.
Yeah. So unless we flip the House, Kaufman will be sitting in that seat again next year.
We can't be any more direct than that. This is why it is so important. And you can't defeat him because he's running unopposed and his district seems to keep electing him. So what that means is all the other districts around, including several in Bucks County, including several in Allegheny County, including scattered seats throughout the state, we need to flip those in order for him to be the minority chair of that committee, because then maybe he'll retire or something after that. But just want to make sure that that's completely clear to everybody. Jill Denham made a comment. The Republicans tend to put their names on bills knowing that leadership will never bring it to a vote. Have you seen that happen?
Yes, absolutely.
You know, one of the comments I got early on, or one of the questions we got is the old, oh, we've got Democrats who are just soft on crime. And of course they bring up Philadelphia's DA, but they also bring up John Fetterman. And I've even seen ads now that accuse Shapiro of being soft on crime. So how much is this soft on crime problem really the problem by Democrats, and how much of it is another issue?
Well, sort of the soft on crime concept is something that's often used to distract from the issues. So I will give you a very precise example. On the day that we were talking about the discharge resolution, at the exact same time as we were sitting in Judiciary Committee with most of the committee members, some other people were hosting a giant rally and press conference in the rotunda talking about the fact that we need to impeach Larry Krasner. So while I'm talking in Judiciary Committee about the fact that we have a suicide problem, we've lost all these lives, in particular, veterans are at risk of suicide because they have higher gun ownership, and the concept of means reduction. So and Adam did speak on this briefly, but basically taking the guns out of people's hands, that's a cultural thing. So like in other countries, in some Southeastern countries, when you talk about means reduction, you're actually talking about reducing the lethality of certain agricultural products. And that reduces suicide. If you talk about some other Southeastern countries, it's actually putting netting around buildings so people don't jump out of them and successfully commit suicide. And when Adam was talking about the fact that suicidality, sort of the means are the issue, but also the majority of people are making these decisions. 80% of people who commit suicide make the decision within 24 hours or less, and sometimes it's substantially less, to take this act. And 90% of people who attempt suicide using less than lethal means and don't succeed, don't actually ever die by suicide. So when we're talking about these sorts of bills, this is a huge part of this conversation. They're having a song and dance on the rotunda saying, Larry Krasner, Larry Krasner, Larry Krasner. And Kaufman and I are going back and forth about the fact he's saying it's the guns in the hands of criminals and these terrible DAs. And I'm going, most of them are gun suicides. What's wrong with you? And he's, oh, DA. So it's part of the way that they're distracting from the issue. And that's intentional. I mean, you don't host a press conference in the rotunda at the same time as you're hosting a meeting to try to distract from the issue unless it's 100% intentional.
Yeah, I think completely agree with you. And that whole process was like extremely frustrating to watch. So one of the comm staffers, Stephen Miskin, for the Republicans was like, we're standing with victims of gun violence, you know, calling out Krasner that day. They were nowhere to be found when 100 victims were there on the steps of the Capitol 2 months, you know, earlier. Like it is a dog and pony show going on. And, you know, look, there's a few things to know. Look, we have tried for, I think, 40 years now or something to fundamentally use the criminal justice system and mandatory minimums and more extreme punishments to in the gun violence crisis, and it hasn't worked. And that's before Larry Krasner, it's after Larry, like, and all that. There's going to need to be punishments in the system, but we also need, and what we know is that actually supporting people in the process and removing the lethality of firearms saves lives and prevents the violence, right? So if you're looking at the shooting on the subway the other week in Philadelphia, that would have been a fist fight and no one would have been dead. So one is like, that's a clear place. And two is, we get into these cycles. And so one of the things that I think has changed has been really investing resources in breaking these cycles of violence and helping intervene before the shooting and helping reduce recidivism as well. But what they're doing in Harrisburg is, if I said, oh, well, okay, here's a process to deal with illegal firearms, they won't touch it. But if they want to attack Krasner or whoever, like, sure, all day long, right? Or call me like, whatever, week on crime. Like, so it is just a distraction, I think, and one that is effective at times. So I think we have to stay very clear about what the causes of gun violence are and the access to firearms being a piece of it, and make sure we don't lose that debate because it's going to be really critical with voters.
What other questions do you all have for our guests? I'm just, I'm both depressed and recharged about the work that we're doing, because again, we're trying to lay out for you the importance of changing who represents us. And it's mostly and including changing the leadership in Harrisburg. So if somebody still wants to be represented by Rob Kaufman, go right ahead, but he shouldn't have the power that he has, and he shouldn't have the ability to make these decisions for all of us as to what's going on. Does CeaseFire, do you endorse candidates also? I haven't looked.
Yes, we do. So CeaseFire PA Action, which is our C4, and CeaseFire PA PAC, our PAC, does candidate endorsements, and are actually considering them right now. We've endorsed Josh Shapiro, but we're finishing up our candidate endorsements right now.
Well, I got a few names I can send your way, or you can look up who we do these kind of bills really work? Are they mostly in the House, or is there action that's being tried in the Senate? And who's the boogeyman in the PA Senate?
There are policies in the Senate. I mean, most of the bills have, mirror bills. So Senator Fontana has the ERPO bill in the Senate, for example, and Senator Hughes has the universal background check bill, and Senator Tartaglia on the lost and stolen. The structure is the same and the problems are the same. I think that there's a little less of a boogeyman in the sense that I think Kaufman enjoys playing the boogeyman and does a very good job. I mean, right. I mean, fundamentally, whenever I critique him, he raises crap loads of money off of it, whatever. But so Senator Baker's a little more reasonable, at least on paper, I think. I think also the reality, as y'all know, is I think there's a sense, no offense to anyone, that we'll get closer in the Senate, but probably have a better chance of flipping the House. And so I think those two things have us more focused there. The Senate played a key role in getting the funding for violence prevention programs. But look, Senator, in the Senate, in the Senate, it's Senator Mastriano. Frankly speaking, he's got a bill to nullify all federal gun laws, which I always say we fought a war over that. And I'm from the South, and thank God the South lost. And, I grew up in Georgia, so thank God, but let's not redo that. That's not how those systems work. So he's obviously, Senator Langerholt has a bill to further punish cities for trying to save the lives of their residents. Senator Corman and Senator Ward are not great, are not good. They just don't talk about this issue quite as much as Kaufman's happy to.
Speaking of Georgia, some big concert in Atlanta in September was just canceled because they couldn't assure that there was going to be gun-free in this big open concert. So check that one, because there was a lot of discussion in this morning's news about it, Georgia gun laws. So it's another reason they should vote against Brian Kemp, but I digress.
And some quick point.
Please do.
Okay, so I know that we're depressing everybody. I always feel like whenever I have conversations now, I'm like, oh, so these people.
No. This isn't depressing. This is firing them up.
Well, and that's the point. So we have what, 98 days now to change the story. So whether you're donating to represent, whether you're donating to candidates, whether you're knocking doors, dropping lit, please do things and make sure that you're drowning out the loud voices in the room that aren't willing to.
Amen to that. We need to flip 12 House seats. And there's a couple that are existing Democrats that are kind of squishy right now. We need all of them reelected, and we need 12 new Democrats. And we've got a list of ones that Represent is supporting that'll really help that cause. We need 4 Senate seats and to tie, and 5 to flip. So again, these are really important things that we're doing. And but as Representative Hanbidge said, we have 98 days left. Think about donating a day a week, if not to raising money for these candidates, door knocking. We tell everybody to go to Turn PA Blue and find I know this weekend they've got people in 4 or 5 counties door knocking for candidates. It's really important.
Jill and I are out, I think, 13 of the next 30 days.
You and Jill Denon?
Denon, yep. Jill Denon's running on the 24th, who's on this call as well.
Well, speaking of that, let's ask, you mentioned, Adam mentioned it's harder in the Senate. So we have 2 fine Senate candidates that we've endorsed on this call. Jill Denon, do you want 2 minutes? And Anne Marie Mitchell, you get 2 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just going to thank Liz. She's been working really hard with me to get this seat. And I appreciate this. And I can't echo enough what Liz has said. I mean, everything she said, I kind of already knew, but I totally agree. And I just want to say that, I've been knocking doors every day, and I put it in the chat. I find it really interesting that the 18 to 25-year-old young men, when you say, what's your number one issue? They say gun violence. And I think they know people, they have friends who have died by suicide. I personally have a friend whose son broke up with his girlfriend. The dad didn't have the gun locked up. Day after Christmas, went in his car and shot himself. So this is absolutely spot on what Adam is talking about. And the bottom line is if we don't flip one of these seats, and I know everyone's saying, oh, the Senate's not going to be flipped. It doesn't matter. If Anne Marie and I can win one of these seats, in 2 years, we can pick up 2 more seats and we can get the process rolling. So we can't look at, oh, flippable or not flippable. We have to get a Democratic majority or nothing is going to change. So I'm just going to say thank you, Liz, for putting a plug out. We are knocking doors. We're trying to raise money. The reality is you can't do this without money. And the Republicans have a lot more access to cash than we do. And we already talked about money in politics, but anything that anyone can do, knock a door, write a postcard is really appreciated.
Anne Marie Mitchell, how would you like to echo that, and how you're going to flip a Senate seat in Bucks?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to everybody at CeaseFire and to Liz for doing the work you're doing.
Anne Marie is a great candidate in Bucks County. She's got a heck of a chance to win, and we're looking forward to watching her campaign and supporting it. Somebody asked which seats are most flippable. The best thing you can do is, besides sending Represent money where we can curate your money and figure out where it can go best, the next best thing you can do is go to turnpablue.org and find out where they're door knocking. If you don't have a particular candidate, if you don't have somebody if you're not sitting in a district like Anne Marie's or Jill's, but you want to work for candidates, go to Turn PA Blue. They send people out every weekend, out joining candidates all over the Commonwealth. So that's a great thing to do. I know we have at least 2 House candidates right now. Denise Maris, where are you running, and how's your race going?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Denise Maris. I'm running for state representative here in the 76th district, which encompasses Clinton and Union counties. My race is going pretty well. We're setting some things up next week to start doing some phone banking, some text banking, lots of canvassing, and just showing up to as many events as possible. I mean, I know that we have an uphill battle, but if it wasn't for Represent PA sending me the monies that they did, you know, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to get more yard signs, because believe it or not, in rural counties, yard signs mean a lot. So I appreciate everything. And I love coming to these sessions. They're absolutely awesome. They keep me on my toes. So when I do knock on the door, I know how to respond to some of the questions that people present to me.
Thank you, Denise. And Denise has got she's right in that she's got a long shot race, but she's running against Stephanie Borowitz, who's an existing legislator who is really not on our side. So, you know, you find a race and you find something you believe in, and you can guarantee she's voting on the other side. So anytime Denise can be a burr to Stephanie Borowitz, it helps the rest of the candidates too. So good luck, Denise. We're proud of you for running.
Thank you very much.
I know we have Alexandra Wisser on. Alexandra.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alex Wisser, running for state representative in the 147th district, which is Western Montgomery County. We're the red end of Montgomery County. It is not all blue, but I am mainly encompassed within Jill Dennett's Senate District 24. So I've been working closely with Jill. We're out canvassing this weekend, and Jill's been a huge help. And I just wanted to say thank you to Represent PA for the endorsement and the support. It means a lot. And yeah, I want to echo what Jill said. You know, donations, door knocking, anything that anyone can do to get the word out about how important this race is. It really is critical. So.
Thank you, Alex. Good to see you. Anne Marie, can we hear you now?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, I gave up. I have like 5 speakers here and the connection isn't working. Anyway, I apologize for that. Technology is great when you can get it to work. So what I was saying was I come from a family of gun violence survivors. My father was a teacher who also had a little bit of a gun hobby, shall we say. He ultimately tried to shoot and kill my mother and my brother. So thank you to the laws in New York at the time where it happened. They were able to remove the guns from the home, I think, but for that. And the fact that the detective was the father of my brother's good friend, very likely I would be having a very different story about having a mother and a brother. So I feel very strongly about ERPO. I feel very strongly about red flag laws, about training for people before they own handguns, long guns. At 14, I took a NRA safety training course, which was the predicate for my father to hand me a 22 at 14 years old. That's the only gun of the collection that still exists. And it's in my home because I am a gun owner, and I know that gives me more credibility when I talk to other people who are gun owners. I feel very strongly that the lack of political courage and will is frankly a fatal flaw, just like I think it's a fatal flaw on certain privacy issues. Like Jill and like several other people who are running, we came into politics from a gun violence prevention lens. My daughter was involved in a Buck Students Demand Action. And I think it's critical that people understand that we're not just fighting about any one issue this year, we're fighting about a lot of issues. Violence against women, violence against LGBTQ people, suicidality, mental health issues, aggression, white supremacy issues, all of these sort of center and intersect with guns. I think we know it. I think there are a lot of other people that know it, and people want to feel safe. In terms of flipping seats, there are probably 5 seats that are flippable in Bucks County. We haven't put enough effort or time into Bucks County to say that it's not doable yet. There was, I don't know, 20 years in Delaware. I don't know how many in Monco before they were able to flip those seats. Bucks is very flippable this year. I'm actually got 3 state house races under my state Senate race that are flippable. And then there's a couple of others that are outside that in areas where they already have a Democratic senator. It is key, in my opinion, not to lose sight of the Senate this year. In addition to Jill and I who are running in flippable areas, there are at least 2 other seats that are flippable. It is very possible to flip the Senate this year. The races are a bargain compared to some of the other races. So I want to say that because people think of state Senate races as being $1 million plus. Our budgets are the same or lower than some of the state house races this year.
Yep.
And it's kind of a sin that we're not investing in them more, because this is a 4-year seat.
And I got to tell you, Represent is continuing to invest in state Senate seats. Not only have we invested in Jill's and Anne Marie's, we're also invested in Jen Chukaitis' race in Monroe County. And
That's 3 of the 4 flippable seats. Possibly, if there may actually be a 5th one as well.
Yeah, so they're all, it's doable. It's not easy, but none of this is easy. Can we go? Thank you very much. Can we go to my last slides, please? So mention this. This is the lay of the landscape. This is what we have to do. We've got the next, when I wrote this slide, I'd said we had the next 75,000 ready to invest. In fact, we've got the next 100,000 ready to invest. We're doing several events we've got one coming up in Allegheny County at the end of August and 3 in the greater Philadelphia area in September. If you want more information, email us. But we're raising money at those events, and all that money, before the event even happens, we're going to be sending out at the end of August or early September. We'll have our next 100,000. But the more money we get in, the more we can turn to women like the ones you saw today, and women running to put Representative Hanbidge in the majority. On August 25th, we're going to have another interesting one. We're going to have Trevor Sutherland of the HDCC and Melanie Rose of the SDCC. We're going to find out how these races are doing, how optimistic they are, and what else we can do. So watch for the invitation later this week. And as we've said, your vote is your minimum contribution this year. I always remind people that I live in Philadelphia. I'm always going to be represented by a Democrat in the state legislature, both the House and the Senate, but that's not enough. We cannot change Pennsylvania without a statewide effort, and that's what we try and do. So I want to thank our 2 speakers. Remember when I said some people run for office to be somebody and some people run for office to do something? I get the impression Representative Kaufman likes to be somebody. Hey, look what I can do. I can stamp on all this legislation around the state. I'm important. But we're lucky to have people like Representative Liz Hanbidge. Sometimes I wonder how these state reps and state senators go to work every day, because it's tough. It's a tough environment for them. But they're working hard for us, and the least we can do is work really, really hard to put them in the majority. So thank you very much, Adam Garber. Thank you very much, Representative Hanbidge. Great chat. Share this with your friends. Tell them you won't believe how upset I am at what I heard this morning, but we've got a route to victory in Pennsylvania, and it runs through flipping the legislature. So thank you very much. Thanks to all of our participants, and I have to go out and raise money now.